The alarm pulsed at 1.2-second intervals, a rhythm that had long since stopped meaning anything except we were still alive. Captain Evelyn Ward stood motionless in the center of the bridge, her right hand resting on the back of her command chair, fingers spread wide as if she could feel the ship's vibrations through the metal. The HCS Valiant was old, underarmed, running on half its reactors, and currently pulling emergency acceleration that would have shaken a newer vessel apart. The hull groaned. Not the subtle creak of normal thermal expansion, but a deep structural complaint that traveled up through the deck, plating, and into her knees. Ward did not flinch. She had been aboard ships that died. She knew the sound of metal deciding whether to hold or fail. The Valiant was still deciding. Jump point, emergence bearing 270, Lieutenant Mei Chen said from the electronic warfare station, her voice flat and professional. Single vessel, Dominion configuration. Scout frigate, class, did not turn. She had already seen the tactical display. The symbol had blinked into existence 12,000 kilometers aft, closing at a velocity that suggested the scout had detected them before it fully translated out of hyperspace. Bad luck, or good discipline on their part. It did not matter which. Classification, she asked. Running signature match now. A pause. Confirmed. Dominion Scout Frigate. Vengeance of Thresh. 400 meters light armament extended sensor suite. A scout, not a warship. A ship designed to find things and report them, which meant somewhere beyond that jump point, there would be something that wanted to know what it found. Ward reached down and tapped the comm panel on her chair. Engine room. Status. Chief Engineer Jonah Briggs's voice came back, crackling with static, the words barely distinguishable over the sound of something mechanical screaming in the background. Captain, we are pushing this reactor past every safety margin I have ever written down. If you want another 3% thrust, I will have to route coolant from the aft environmental systems. Do it. The crew in Section 7 will lose heat in about. They have jackets. Ward cut the channel. Commander Isaac Moreno stepped up beside her, his jaw tight. He was younger than her by nearly 20 years, and it showed in the way he held himself, shoulders braced, as if he could physically resist the ship's deceleration. Captain, we cannot outrun a scout frigate. If we burn evasive, they will track us straight to the evacuation routes. Ward knew this. She had known it the moment she saw the contact appear. The Valiant was a Heg cruiser designed for fleet engagements, not running. Its reactors were half crippled. Its missile magazines were at 17%. Its point defense network had been scavenged for parts to keep other systems online. Against a modern Dominion scout, they had exactly one advantage. The debris field. Helm, she said. Plot an emergency deceleration burn into the Kepri Station debris field. Full reverse thrust. I want us dropping velocity by 40% before we enter the outer edge. Moreno's expression shifted from tension to confusion. Captain, if we decelerate into that wreckage, we will be sitting targets. They can pick us apart at their leisure. Ward turned to face him. She did not raise her voice. She never raised her voice. Commander, how many EVA-capable crew do we have aboard? Excluding the Marine complement? Maybe a dozen. Sergeant Petrov and 3 of his people. Suit them up now. I want them in the debris field before we arrive. Moreno stared at her for a moment. Then something clicked behind his eyes. He did not ask the obvious question. He simply nodded and moved to the internal comm station to relay the order. Ward watched him go. Moreno was a good officer. He wanted to die well, which was noble but useless. She needed him to want to die usefully instead. That was a harder lesson to teach. The bridge fell silent, except for the alarms and the groaning hull. Chen's fingers moved across her console, rerouting power to the deceleration thrusters. The tactical display showed the Vengeance of Thresh closing at a steady rate, its vector adjusted to match their course change. The scout was committed. That was good. A committed pursuer was a predictable pursuer. Debris field in 90 seconds, Chen said. Ward moved to the main viewport. The forward display showed the remains of Kepri Station tumbling in the void. Twisted girders, shattered habitat rings, the dark husk of its main reactor core, still radiating a faint thermal signature. The mining station had been home to 12,000 people. The Dominion had passed through this sector 3 weeks ago. The station had not survived, neither would they, but the question was never about survival. It was about time. Bridge to Sergeant Petrov. Ward's voice was calm, almost conversational. Petrov here. The Marine commander's voice came through clear, with no background noise. He was already in his suit. We are suited and ready. Commander Moreno is with us. We have the container. Good. You know the drill. Hide among the wreckage. When the scout passes, wait until it reaches optimal proximity to the derelict reactor core, then detonate. Make it look like a ship's signature going critical. And if they investigate us before we get into position, then you are already in EVA suits and surrounded by debris. You have a better chance of surviving a boarding action than we do of outrunning them. Petrov laughed. It was a short, rough sound.
Understood, Captain. Petrov out.
Ward turned back to the viewport. The debris field was filling the forward screen now, a slowly rotating maze of metal and stone. The helm officer was already adjusting their trajectory, threading the Valiant through gaps that would not exist in 30 seconds. Deceleration burn in 5, Chen said. 4, 3, 2. The ship lurched. Ward grabbed the back of her chair as the inertial dampeners struggled to compensate. The hull screamed. The smell of hot insulation flooded the bridge, acrid and sharp. Somewhere in the aft sections, something broke with a sound like a gunshot. The Valiant bled velocity into the void, and the wreckage of Capri Station rushed up to meet them. Through the viewport, Ward saw a cargo container tumble past. Standard issue, dull grey stenciled lettering, HCS Valiant MISC. Supplies do not jettison. It caught the light of the distant red dwarf as it rotated, and for a moment, the serial number was visible 403, then it was gone, tumbling into the shadow of a ruined habitat ring. Petrov is away, Chen confirmed. I have his suit transponder signal inside the debris field. He is moving toward the reactor core. The Vengeance of Thresh continued its approach, its sensor array sweeping across the wreckage. The Dominion were methodical. They would scan every piece of debris before committing to a search pattern. They would find the Valiant if she stayed visible. Helm, Ward said, set a course into the corona of the red dwarf. Minimum safe distance. I want our thermal signature masked within their sensor noise. Moreno had returned to the bridge. He stood beside her, watching the tactical display. The scout frigate was now less than 3,000 kilometers from the debris field's outer edge. Close. Too close. Captain, Moreno said quietly. If Petrov fails, they will see us entering the corona. We will have no maneuverability. They will destroy us. Ward did not answer. She was watching the timer on her console. 20 seconds until Petrov should reach the derelict reactor core. 15. 10. On the tactical display, the Vengeance of Thresh adjusted its course, vectoring directly toward the wreckage where Petrov was hiding. 5 seconds, the scout frigate's engines flared as it began to decelerate. Then the derelict reactor core detonated. The flash was brief, blinding, a white bloom that expanded through the debris field and scattered wreckage in all directions. The tactical display showed a spike of radiation and thermal energy, a signature that looked exactly like a ship's reactor, breaching containment. The Vengeance of Thresh changed course immediately, breaking off its pursuit to investigate the explosion. The scout's sensors would show a catastrophic failure, a human ship hiding in the debris, attempting to power up its systems and failing. The explosion would look like a death. Ward watched the display. The scout frigate was moving toward the detonation site, its sensor arrays focused on the expanding cloud of vaporized metal. It would find nothing. Petrov and his team were already hidden behind a slab of station armor, their suits running on passive mode, radiating no detectable signature. Helm, Ward said. Execute course correction now. Take us into the corona. Silent running. No active emissions. The Valiant angled away from the debris field, its main engines cutting to standby as the maneuvering thrusters pushed them toward the red dwarf's glow. The hull temperature began to rise as they approached the stellar corona, the ship's external sensors recording a corresponding increase in background radiation. Within minutes, their thermal signature would be indistinguishable from the star itself. The bridge crew exhaled. Ward did not. She stood at the viewport, watching the red light wash across the bridge, and calculated the next play. They had escaped this time, but the scout would report the explosion. Dominion intelligence would analyze the signature. They would conclude that a human ship had tried to hide in the debris field and died. That was good. That was exactly what she wanted them to think. But there were 3,199 other ships in the invasion fleet, and each one would have to be convinced that the Valiant was not what it appeared to be. She picked up her mug from the console. The coffee inside had gone cold, as it always did. She drank it anyway. Lieutenant Chen, she said. How many drones do we have remaining? Chen checked her console. 37, Captain. And cargo containers. A pause. Approximately 412. Most of them were aboard the station's storage platforms. They were scheduled for decommissioning. Word nodded slowly. Excellent. The red dwarf's light bled through the bridge's shielded viewports, painting everything in a deep, sullen crimson. The Valiant sat motionless in the corona's radiation shadow, its hull still ticking and creaking as the thermal stress bled away. On the main display, a tactical overlay showed the debris field of the destroyed mining station, a cloud of twisted metal and frozen atmosphere spreading across 1,000 kilometers. The vengeance of Thresh had broken off pursuit and was now sweeping the wreckage, searching for the explosion that had never been anything more than a salvaged reactor core and a single cargo container. Ward didn't watch the display. She was already scrolling through the station's supply manifests, her fingers moving across the datapad with the methodical precision of a surgeon sorting instruments. The screen cast a pale blue glow across her face, catching the lines around her eyes and the grey threading through her dark hair. She took a sip from the mug beside her elbow, cold coffee, as always. The bitter taste settled in her throat. "Captain?" Moreno's voice came from behind her. He stood at the tactical station, one hand braced against the console bulkhead to steady himself in the residual vibration. "We're at minimum thermal emission. Sensors show no pursuit vector. They're still picking through the debris." "Good," Ward said, without looking up. "We'll stay here for 12 hours, enough time to shake any passive trackers. Then we move." "Move where?" Moreno asked. The question carried an edge of frustration. They had turned away from Earth, deeper into enemy territory, and he still didn't know why. "Our orders were to rendezvous with the evacuation convoy at Tau Ceti. Instead, I know what our orders said." Ward set the mug down. The click of ceramic against metal was quiet, final. She turned the datapad toward him. "This station was scheduled for decommissioning 6 months ago. The Dominion never bothered to salvage it. Do you know what that means?" Moreno studied the manifest. His brow furrowed. "That's a lot of cargo containers. 412, according to the inventory. Plus a full drone maintenance bay, civilian-grade communication transmitters, power cells, and enough reactor scavenging to keep us running for another 30 days. Ward stood, moving to the central command chair. She didn't sit. She stood behind it, hands resting on the backrest, her eyes fixed on the display. The station was abandoned. The gear was left behind because nobody thought it was worth recovering. They were wrong. Moreno opened his mouth, then closed it. He was a good officer, loyal, brave, quick to act, but he needed to understand before he acted, and Ward was giving him nothing but fragments. She didn't blame him. She wasn't ready to explain the whole picture. "Not yet. Here's what we're going to do," she said, her voice level, unhurried. "Chief Briggs will coordinate salvage telemetry from engineering. We have 37 shipboard drones remaining. I want them divided into 3 search patterns. 1 for the container clusters, 1 for the drone bay equipment, 1 for the transmitters. Sergeant Petrov's Marines will handle EVIA retrieval for anything the drones can't secure. Lieutenant Chen will begin cataloging the communications gear as it comes aboard." "That's a lot of salvage," Moreno said, his tone cautious. "We have maybe 20 hours before that scout reports back to the main fleet. If they send a pursuit squadron." "They will," Ward said. "But we'll be gone before they arrive, and we'll be carrying everything that station had to offer." She finally looked at him, her eyes steady, unblinking. "I need this done quickly, Commander. Quietly. No chatter on open channels, no distress calls, no questions until we're clear of this system." Moreno held her gaze for a moment, searching for something, reassurance, a hint of the plan, a crack in the calm. He found nothing but resolve. He nodded once. "Aye, Captain." He turned and began issuing orders. Ward watched him go, then turned back to the display. The debris field drifted in silence, indifferent to the war being fought across the corridor. Somewhere in that cloud, a single cargo container, number 403, scuffed grey metal, stenciled with the words HCS Valiant, Miss, Supplies. "Do not jettison," remained tethered to the wreckage, its transponder still blinking faintly. It would be recovered. They had time. She lifted the mug again. The coffee was cold, but she drank it anyway, because she'd learned long ago that hot coffee was a luxury for people who had time to finish it. She didn't have time. She had 37 drones, 412 containers, and 68 days to convince an enemy armada that they were outnumbered. Her fingers traced the edge of the datapad. The manifests were already burned into memory. She was calculating, even now, how many of those containers she could convert into decoys. How much transmitter power she needed to simulate a fleet, how many fake command signatures it would take to make a Grand Strategos doubt his own sensors. She didn't tell Moreno because she couldn't. Not yet. He needed to see the plan unfold. one piece at a time, until the whole shape became clear. Until he understood that retreat wasn't cowardice. It was the first move in a game the Dominion didn't know they were playing. The red dwarf's light flickered, a flare rising from the surface and falling away into the void. Ward watched it, unmoving. The Valiant hummed around her, its reactor throttled to standby, its hull still radiating heat. The crew was already moving, already salvaging, already building the foundations of a lie so vast it would need to be supported by every piece of scrap they could haul. She set the empty mug down. There was no time for coffee. There was only work. The red dwarf's corona painted the bridge in dim crimson, the kind of light that made everyone look blood-stained. Ward stood at the center of the tactical plot, her fingers pressed flat against its cold surface, feeling the faint vibration of the reactor, running at 37%. Behind her, Moreno had just finished coordinating the last drone retrieval. 412 cargo containers, 37 drones, 3 civilian-grade transmitters, and enough reactor scavenging to keep the ship breathing for another week. She did not turn when the sensor officer spoke. Incoming data burst, Captain. Dominion military channel. Encrypted, but we have the decryption keys from the station's archives. Put it through to my console, Ward said. Her voice was flat, almost bored. The crew had come to recognize that tone. It meant she was thinking faster than anyone else in the room. The message appeared as a stream of translated text across her display. She read it once, then again. A slow smile touched her lips, gone before anyone could be certain they'd seen it. What is it? Moreno asked, stepping closer. His boots made soft clicks on the deck plating. The Dominion scouts report, Ward said. They saw us. They tracked us into the debris field. They marked us as listen to this. Defective, low priority, single obsolete heavy cruiser fleeing. She paused. They are sending 1 pursuit squadron, 12 frigates, 1 light carrier. The main invasion force has already resumed advance. Moreno stared at her. 12 frigates. That's it, Ward said. She turned to face him, and in the red light her eyes looked almost black. They think we're a straggler, a remnant, something to be swept aside by a patrol. They are not concerned. Lieutenant Chen spoke from her station without looking up. They're underestimating us. Yes, Ward said. And that is exactly what we need. The bridge was silent for a long moment. The only sounds were the low hum of the recyclers, the occasional creak of the hull adjusting to thermal stress, and the soft beep of the tactical plot as it updated the position of the pursuit squadron. 12 frigates, a single light carrier. They would reach the system's edge in approximately 48 hours. Ward reached for the coffee mug sitting on the arm of her command chair. She lifted it, took a sip, and grimaced. Cold, it was always cold. She set it down again. Commander Moreno, she said, her voice regaining its crisp edge. How many of those cargo containers can we outfit with decoy transmitters before the pursuit squadron arrives? Moreno blinked. Outfit them? For what purpose? To make them look like ships, Ward said. Small ones, drones maybe, a few civilian freighters, something that would prompt an enemy to split their forces to investigate. Moreno's jaw tightened. He had been expecting a running battle, a final charge, something clean. But this was not clean. This was lying with cargo containers. He held her gaze for a moment, then nodded. With the drone repair kits we salvaged, maybe half, 200. If we work around the clock, then start, Ward said. I want every container that still has a power cell rigged with a transmitter and a simple proximity trigger. Lieutenant Chen, you will begin drafting a series of fake fleet communications. Use the same encryption we recovered from the station. Make them sound like a logistics group, requesting resupply, reporting damage, arguing about who gets the last shipment of reactor coolant. Chen's fingers had already begun moving across her console. People hear what they expect to hear, she said. If I make the chatter sound like a fleet that's been beaten down and is hiding, they'll believe it's real. They'll have to. Ward nodded. She walked to the edge of the tactical plot, where the holodisplay showed the pursuit squadron's projected path. 12 frigates, 1 carrier. The Dominion had sent a token force because they genuinely believed the human navy was broken. They were right. The human navy was broken. But they were wrong about what broken meant. Ward thought of the ships she had lost, the friends who had burned, the colonies that had fallen. She thought of the evacuation ships, still crawling toward Earth with 20 billion civilians packed into every available berth. They needed time. She was going to give it to them, 1 cargo container at a time. 1 ship cannot stop an armada, she said half to herself. The words were soft, almost a whisper. Morno heard her. He turned. Captain? She looked up. Her face was calm, but there was something behind her eyes, a cold, patient fire. "We're going to make them believe they're fighting a ghost fleet," she said. "And then we're going to make them waste their invasion, searching for something that doesn't exist." She picked up the cold coffee again, took another sip, and set it down. "Get to work, Commander. We have 46 hours before those frigates arrive, and I intend to have a reception waiting for them." The bridge crew moved, consoles beeped, orders were relayed, and somewhere in the red light of a dying star, the first threads of a lie began to weave themselves into something the enemy would not be able to ignore. Ward stayed at the tactical plot, watching the pursuit squadron's icons creep across the display. 12 frigates, 1 carrier. They thought they were hunting a wounded animal. They had no idea what they were hunting. The mess hall smelled of reheated rations and hydraulic fluid. The emergency lighting cast everything in a jaundiced tint, and somewhere near the galley, a fluorescent tube buzzed at a frequency that sat exactly wrong in the human ear. Ward stood at the head of the collapsible table, with a sheet of paper in her hand. Real paper, the last ream from the captain's stationery drawer, salvaged along with everything else. The senior officers had filed in without ceremony. Moreno sat to her left, arms crossed, jaw tight. Chen took the far end, her fingers already tapping an absent rhythm on the tabletop. Briggs leaned against the bulkhead near the air recycler, his coveralls stained with coolant and what looked like dried blood from a cut he hadn't bothered to bandage. Petrov stood by the door, arms behind his back, watching the corridor as though expecting the Dominion to materialize at any moment. Ward unfolded the paper. On it she had drawn the Kepri corridor by hand, a series of jagged lines representing the unstable hyperspace routes, with a single circle near the terminus, marking the choke point closest to Earth's defensive perimeter. The lines were precise. She had spent 2 hours on them while the salvage drones hauled containers into the cargo bay. "You've all seen the manifests," she said. 37 drones, 412 cargo containers, civilian transmitters, scavenged reactor cores. That's what we brought back. No one spoke. She tapped the circle on the paper. "The Dominion has 3,200 warships advancing through this corridor. They will reach this choke point in approximately 70 standard days. After that, Earth has no meaningful defensive line." Moreno shifted in his chair. "We know the numbers. Captain, we have 1 ship," Ward continued, as though he hadn't spoken. "1 heavy cruiser running on half its reactors, with a crew of 187, and enough supplies for maybe 30 days. We cannot stop them." She paused. The fluorescent tube buzzed. Somewhere in the galley, a storage locker clicked as the thermal cycling shifted. Unless they believe they are fighting an entire navy. Moreno's chair scraped against the deck plates. He stood, then sat back down, his hands flat on the table. "With respect, Captain. You're talking about running. We've been running for 3 days. The crew needs to fight. They need to live long enough for the fight to matter." Ward did not raise her voice. She never raised her voice. 1 ship charging into their formation buys us approximately 45 seconds of news coverage. 1 ship that makes them think they're facing a hidden fleet buys us weeks, months, possibly enough time for the evacuation to complete. Moreno's jaw worked. He looked at the paper, then at her. "You want us to bluff?" "No." Ward set the paper down flat. "I want us to build a navy out of nothing. Cargo containers with fake transmitters. Drones broadcasting fleet-level command traffic. Scavenged civilian equipment programmed to sound like warship engineering chatter. Every piece of salvage we just recovered will become a ghost ship, and those ghosts will convince the Dominion that they are advancing into a trap." She let that sink in. Briggs had stopped leaning against the bulkhead. Petrov's gaze had shifted from the corridor to her face. Chen's fingers had gone still on the tabletop. "I have altered the orders from Earth High Command," Ward said. "According to our official logs, we never received the retreat signal. We are operating under standing directive to conduct reconnaissance in force behind enemy lines. That is the cover story." "For how long?" Petrov's voice was flat professional. 68 days. That's how long the evacuation of the frontier worlds will take. After that, we have bought Earth enough time to consolidate its defenses." She looked at each of them in turn. "We will not survive. That is not the objective. The objective is to make sure the Dominion wastes its entire invasion fighting ghosts." The mess hall went quiet. The air recycler hissed. The fluorescent tube buzzed. Ward could smell her own sweat beneath the layers of uniform fabric, could feel the exhaustion pressing against the backs of her eyes, but she held herself still. Then Chen spoke. Her voice was soft, almost contemplative. I can make one ship sound like 50. Ward turned to look at her. Chen's eyes were distant, clearly already running calculations behind them. You'll need to, Ward said. No, Chen replied. You don't understand. I can make one ship sound like 50. I can fabricate encryption keys that match their expectations. I can simulate command chatter between ships that don't exist. I can make their analysts spend weeks trying to profile commanding officers who are entirely fictional. She paused. A small smile touched her lips. People hear what they expect to hear. Ward nodded. She folded the paper into precise creases and tucked it into her pocket. The gesture was final, ceremonial, though no one acknowledged it. Then we start tonight. The transmission arrived at 0347 shipboard time, encrypted with human military-grade protocols that Kareth's analysts had spent 8 days trying to crack. When they finally did, the contents made no sense. He read the decrypted message twice, then a third time, his ceremonial command rod tapping against his palm in a rhythm his subordinates recognized as deep concentration. The message claimed to be from something called Third Fleet Command. It discussed logistics rendezvous coordinates, ammunition resupply schedules, and a planned flanking maneuver through the Capri Corridor's northern branch. The problem was that Third Fleet did not exist. Kareth had reviewed the final battle reports from Tau Ceti and Proxima. Every human warship larger than a corvette had been accounted for destroyed, disabled, or fleeing toward Earth with their tails between their hull plates. His intelligence division had confirmed this with a thoroughness that had made him the youngest Grand Strategos in Dominion history. The human navy was broken. There was no Third Fleet. And yet the transmission was authentic. The encryption keys matched the human naval hierarchy. The formatting followed their standard operating procedures exactly. The officer names, a Commander Orlov, a Captain Sorensen, and Admiral Hayes, all appeared in captured human personnel records. Kareth had his chief analyst, Tharvin, run the message through every verification protocol they possessed. It came back clean every time. He ordered a recon flight to the coordinates mentioned in the transmission. The squadron commander, Ally, reported back 90 minutes later. The sector was empty. No warships, no bases, no evidence of any human military presence whatsoever. Kareth felt a flicker of satisfaction. His initial assessment had been correct. The message was a ruse, a desperate attempt by a dying enemy to create the illusion of strength. Then Ally's second report arrived. Deep sensor sweeps of the sector had detected faint engine signatures, not fresh ones. The thermal residue was at least 72 hours old, but the pattern was unmistakable. Multiple vessels had passed through that region recently, not one ship, but many. The signatures suggested at least 15 different hull classes, ranging from small escort, frigates to capital ships with reactor outputs matching their heaviest battleship tonnage. Kareth set down his command rod and stared at the holographic star chart floating above his console. The blue light cast sharp shadows across his carapace. The faint citrus scent of his stimulant drink rose from the cup beside him, untouched and growing cold. His analysts had a theory. Tharvin presented it carefully, aware that she was questioning her Grand Strategos' judgment. The humans, she suggested, might have hidden a reserve fleet. They had lost every major engagement, yes, but what if they had never committed their full strength? What if the ships destroyed at Tau Ceti and Proxima had been sacrificial decoys? Designed to make the Dominion think victory was certain while the real fleet gathered in secret. It was a paranoid theory. It was also consistent with every piece of data they possessed. Kareth sat in his command chair for a long moment, the only sound the soft hum of the gravity generators and the quiet beep of the tactical plotter updating its display. He thought about the single heavy cruiser that had escaped into the debris field, the one he had marked as defective and low priority. He thought about the scout report that had described it as outdated, underarmed, running on half its reactors. A dying ship, fleeing from a fight it could not win. But what if it had not been fleeing? What if it had been leading them somewhere? What if the cruiser was a scout itself, sent ahead to draw Dominion forces into a trap, while the hidden fleet prepared to strike? He could not ignore the possibility. His entire doctrine was built on complete information, and his information was telling him that something did not add up. The transmission was authentic. The engine signatures were real, and his instincts, the same instincts that had made him unbeaten in 43 campaigns, were screaming at him that he was missing something. He made his decision. "Order a full intelligence sweep of the entire corridor," he said, his voice flat and controlled. I want every sector scanned, every gravity shadow mapped, every possible hiding place identified. We will not advance until we know where the Third Fleet is hiding." His command staff exchanged glances. The invasion had already been delayed by resupply logistics and the need to secure captured territory. This would add another 4 days at minimum. Kareth saw their hesitation and understood it. He also understood that hesitation was exactly what a clever enemy would want him to feel, but he had no choice. A commander who ignored contradictory data was a commander who led his fleet into an ambush. He picked up his command rod and resumed tapping it against his palm. 4 days, he said, more to himself than to anyone else. We will find them, and then we will finish what we started. The star chart glowed before him, empty and silent. Somewhere out there, a fleet was hiding. He was certain of it now. He had to be, because the alternative, that he had been outthought by a single damaged cruiser and a handful of lies, was simply not possible. The gas giant filled the forward viewport, banded amber and cream, its rings a thin silver line catching the distant star's light. Ward watched the rings grow as the Valiant drifted into their shadow. The ship's imaging sensors showed the Dominion fuel depot on the far side of the planet, a cluster of storage tanks and docking arms orbiting at a steady geosynchronous point. 12 tankers at anchor, 1 light patrol craft circling the perimeter, no warships. "Hold position here," she said. "Lieutenant Chen, begin your broadcast sequence." Chen's hands moved across her console. The Valiant's transmitters, normally used for standard fleet communications, had been reprogrammed over the past 48 hours. She had written new encryption keys, fabricated command structures, built an entire order of battle from scrap data and imagination. Her screen showed a sprawling tactical display, 32 decoy drones, each tagged with a different ship class identifier: destroyer, frigate, light cruiser, support vessel. She had even added a battleship, the Resolute, a name pulled from a memorial database at the mining station. "Starting with the destroyer signature," Chen said. "Deploying drones now." The Valiant's remaining drones, all 37 of them, though 5 were held in reserve, launched one by one from the forward tubes. Each carried a signal amplifier and a thermal emitter. Briggs had tuned each emitter to a different reactor profile, using civilian power cells scavenged from the cargo containers. The drones spread out in a loose formation, matching the pattern of a standard human screening force. Ward heard the soft thump of the last drone clearing the tube. Then Chen's voice, steady, broadcasting command chatter now. The speakers in the bridge carried a fabricated conversation, a gruff male voice, Admiral Hayes, according to the script, demanding a status report. A female voice, tense and professional, confirming formation integrity. Another voice, younger, reporting a minor engine fluctuation on the Resolute. The words were generated by a simple AI routine, but the pacing and intonation were perfect. Ward had insisted Chen record the cadences from real military drills. People hear what they expect to hear. "Patrol craft is launching from the depot," Moreno said from the tactical station. "Single vessel, low acceleration, matching our decoy formation's bearing." Ward did not turn. "Briggs, cycle the reactors." Far below, in the engineering section, Jonah Briggs nodded to his team. He had rerouted the main engine exhaust through a dispersal duct, a temporary construction of salvaged piping and civilian pressure valves that split the thermal output into 4 separate plumes. By cycling the Valiant's 2 remaining reactors in sequence, power up, power down, power up, he could produce a signature that looked like multiple ships adjusting their formation. He pressed a button on his panel. The deck vibrated. The thermal signature changed. "Done," he said over the intercom. "They'll see 4 ships for the next 3 minutes." On the bridge, Chen's display updated. The Dominion patrol craft had altered course, moving toward the densest cluster of decoy signals. It was a cautious approach, weapons powered down, sensors sweeping. Standard reconnaissance procedure, exactly what they had anticipated. Ward looked at the chronometer. "Petrov, status." Sergeant Alexei Petrov's voice came through the speaker, distorted by the proximity alarm on the cargo container he was hiding inside. "Containers are in position, both rigged with spent reactor cores and fake transponders. We've painted them with fleet markings. They'll read as damaged human ships on any passive scan. Trigger when the patrol is within 5,000 kilometers, understood." The bridge fell silent. The only sounds were the low hum of the ship's life support and the faint crackle of Chen's fabricated radio traffic. Ward picked up her coffee mug. It was cold, as always. She drank anyway. The patrol craft moved through the decoy formation. Its sensor sweeps would show 32 contacts, a handful of them, with thermal readings consistent with combat damage. The fabricated distress call from the damaged destroyer began broadcasting on an emergency channel, a female voice, breathless, reporting hull breaches and requesting immediate assistance. The patrol craft slowed, its weapons systems powered up. "Now," Ward said. Petrov triggered the detonators. 2 cargo containers, including number 403, freshly repainted with the markings of the fictional battleship, Resolute, erupted in controlled explosions. The reactor cores inside created brief, intense energy spikes. To any sensor, it looked like 2 damaged ships detonating their power plants in a final act of defiance. The thermal bloom was visible even to the Valiant's passive optics, a brief flare against the gas giant's atmosphere. The patrol craft reversed course. Hard, its engines burned at emergency acceleration. "Retreating," Moreno said. "They're broadcasting a contact report. Multiple human warships. Ambush. Casualties sustained." Ward set the coffee mug down. She waited. 5 minutes passed. The patrol craft disappeared behind the planet's curvature. The depot's defense systems activated, point defense turrets rotating, shield generators humming to life. A priority transmission flashed across the local network, addressed to Dominion High Command, requesting immediate reinforcement. Chen turned in her seat. "The report is on its way to the Strategos. They recorded our fabricated combat data, the destroyed ship signatures, the emergency chatter, every piece of it." Ward did not smile. She stood slowly, her knees stiff from hours of sitting. The bridge smelled of hot electronics and recycled air. She looked at the battered, scuffed cargo container, number 403. Spinning slowly in the gas giant's atmosphere, its transmitter still broadcasting a fabricated after-action report. In a few hours, it would burn up completely. "Good work, everyone," she said. "Secure from deception operations. Prepare to move to the next rally point." She turned back to the viewport. The rings of the gas giant glittered in the starlight. Somewhere beyond them, a Dominion Strategos was reading a report about a fleet that did not exist. The first domino had fallen. There were many more to place. Ward picked up her cold coffee. It tasted like duty. She drank it anyway. Grand Strategos Kareth sat alone in his command chamber, the holographic star chart frozen mid-sweep. The blue light cast sharp lines across his carapace, illuminating the subtle cracks that had formed near his left ocular ridge. Stress fractures, the medics had said, from the prolonged exposure to zero-grav combat stimulants. He did not care. 23 reported engagements, 17 with confirmed sensor contacts, 0 captured hulls, 0 fatalities on the Dominion side, and 53 days lost. He had ordered the full comparative analysis 3 days ago, after the 9th contradictory report from the Kepri corridor's eastern edge. Chief Analyst Tharvin had compiled the data with his characteristic precision. Every intercepted transmission logged by frequency, duration, encryption protocol, and origin drift. Every decoy contact cross-referenced against known Dominion patrol schedules. Every Ghost Fleet sighting plotted on a single star map. The pattern was obvious now. The same fleet never appeared in 2 places simultaneously. The signal strength of the so-called Grand Fleet never exceeded the output of a single powerful transmitter, a station-grade unit, or possibly a cruiser's main array running at emergency levels. The decoys were always found near gas giants or asteroid belts, places where wreckage could be hidden or confused with natural debris, and every single engagement had been a demonstration, not a battle. They fired, they fled. They left behind noise and echoes and nothing else. Kareth's mandibles clicked once, a sound that echoed in the stillness. He had not moved from his command chair in 3 hours. The stimulant drink on the console beside him had gone cold, its citrus scent now cloying rather than clarifying. He had been outthought, not outgunned, not outmaneuvered. Outthought, the human ship, that single, battered heavy cruiser, the Valiant as their own logs had named it, had never intended to defeat him. It had intended to delay him, and it had succeeded beyond any rational projection. 53 days. The evacuation of their frontier worlds would be nearly complete by now. The industrial base of their core systems would be mobilizing. The window for a swift, decisive invasion had closed. He reviewed the earliest intercept again. The message from 3rd Fleet Command. Authentic encryption, proper formatting, officer names that matched existing human personnel records, all of it fabricated. Every detail designed to be credible enough to investigate, and every investigation had fed the illusion. They had built a navy out of lies and logistics. Kareth did not feel anger. Anger was a failure of discipline. He felt something older, something he had not experienced since his first command. The cold, hollow certainty that he had been outmatched by an enemy he had dismissed as broken. "They didn't win," he said aloud. His own voice sounded foreign in the empty chamber. "They prevented. There is a difference." He understood now. The Valiant had not been fighting for victory. It had been fighting for time. Every decoy, every broadcast, every staged engagement had been a payment against a debt it could never repay. But the debt had been measured in hours, not in hulls destroyed. And the enemy had paid in full. He stood slowly, his joints protesting the hours of stillness. The holographic display flickered as his movement disturbed its field. He tapped his command rod against the console, a sharp click that brought up the fleet's tactical net. "All ships," he said, his voice flat, controlled. "Converge on the last known coordinates of the human vessel, Valiant. Priority Omega, execute immediately." The orders propagated across the fleet. 217 warships adjusted their vectors. The harbinger of order began its slow turn, its massive engines igniting with a tremor that vibrated through the deck plates. Kareth did not watch the star chart. He already knew what he would find at those coordinates. Nothing, or worse. Another layer of deception, another ghost waiting to be fed. The quiet beep of an incoming report pulsed from the console. He ignored it. He stared at the cold stimulant drink, its surface motionless in the artificial gravity. 53 days. He had lost 53 days to a single ship and a cargo container full of lies. The taste of bile rose in his throat. He swallowed it. He would find them, he would destroy them, but he would not make the mistake of underestimating them again. The human captain, her name was Evelyn Ward, had taught him a lesson his own doctrine had never accounted for, that an enemy could be rational in ways he did not understand. She had not fought to win. She had fought to make him believe he was losing, and he had believed. The chamber was silent, except for the hum of the gravity generators and the soft hiss of the air recyclers. Kareth remained standing, his mandibles still, his mind turning over the data one final time. The deception was elegant. It was thorough. It was the work of an intelligence that understood information as a weapon. He would not make the same mistake twice, but as the fleet accelerated toward the empty coordinates, he could not shake the certainty that Evelyn Ward was already somewhere else, already building another lie, already buying her people more time. And he had no idea how to stop her. The bridge was red. Emergency lighting painted every surface the color of old blood, and the air recyclers had begun to wheeze. Ward sat in her command chair, with both hands resting flat on the armrests, watching the tactical plot devour the last of the station's power. The transmitter had gone silent 12 minutes ago. Its final data burst had been clean. 12 hours of fabricated fleet deployments, carrier launches, formation changes, repair reports, fuel requests. Thousands of voices that had never existed, speaking words that had never been spoken, all converging on a single point in Kareth's intelligence network. Now the station breathed heat into vacuum. Ward listened to the hull contract. The metal groaned, then stopped. Somewhere aft, a coolant line had frozen solid. She didn't have anyone left to fix it. Morneau stood at the weapons console, though there was nothing left to fire. His hands hovered over the controls anyway, as if muscle memory might conjure missiles from empty magazines. "This is it," he said. Ward did not turn. "You wanted a glorious last stand." "I wanted." He stopped, laughed, a broken sound dry as dust. "I wanted to go out fighting, not sitting here waiting for the numbers to catch up." She understood. She had felt the same pull, decades ago, when she was young enough to believe that dying well mattered more than dying useful. She had learned better. The universe did not grade on style points. "They're coming in," Moreno said. "I count 212, maybe more behind the sensor horizon." Ward nodded. The tactical plot was too degraded to show the full picture, but she didn't need it. She knew what the Dominion saw. A single station, leaking radiation, with one cruiser docked to its spine. A cruiser that had run for 3 months. A cruiser that had no fuel, no missiles, no escape. A cruiser that had already won. She keyed the intercom. The channel hissed static. No one answered. She had sent the last evac shuttle away 90 minutes ago, carrying Chen, Briggs, and Petrov. Petrov had refused the order. She had pulled rank and locked the hatch herself. He would have time to hate her for it if he survived. That was enough. "They're hailing us," Moreno said. "Let them. You don't want to hear what they have to say. I know what they have to say." She stood, her knees ached. She ignored them. "They want our surrender. They want to know where the fleet is. They want to know why we kept running. They want answers that don't exist." She walked to the engineering station. Briggs had jury-rigged a secondary console there before he left, routing the remaining decoy control systems through a single panel. 400 cargo containers, each rigged with a civilian-grade transmitter and a reactor grenade. 3 months of scavenging, fabricating, and praying that no one checked the math checked out. She placed her palm on the activation plate. The system ran a diagnostic. Green. All 400 decoys were online, spread across a 200-kilometer radius, each broadcasting a different transponder signature. The Dominion's sensors would show 2,000 warships. They would hesitate. That was all she needed. "We should do something dramatic," Moreno said. "You know, for the record." Ward almost smiled. "I transmitted the final log already." "The final log, right." He shook his head. "I meant like a speech, something to remember us by." She considered it. She had never been good at speeches. She had been good at logistics, at lying, at calculating how many hours a single cargo container could buy. That was her memorial. Not words, numbers. "If you want to say something," she said, "say it to them." She gestured at the main viewer. It flickered to life, showing the Dominion fleet in full formation. Hundreds of ships, their hulls catching the distant light of the system's star. They were beautiful, in the way that any well-organized weapon was beautiful. Precise, purposeful, wasted. Ward toggled the transmitter. The channel opened. "This is Captain Evelyn Ward," she said, "HCS Valiant. I am transmitting our final position and asset inventory. The Ghost Fleet is standing down. All assets expended. Recommend continuing deception operations if possible." She paused. Log follows. End transmission. She closed the channel. Morno stared at her. "That's it. That's it. You just gave them our operational summary. They're going to kill us anyway." She sat back down in the command chair. The leather was cold. "Might as well make sure they know what we did. Confusion is better than secrecy at this point. If they believe the deception is ongoing, they'll chase shadows for another month. If they don't, they'll assume we were bluffing, and they'll press forward. Either way, the data is accurate. Everything we had. Everything we spent." She looked at him. "They'll spend weeks analyzing it, and every hour they spend analyzing is an hour they're not advancing." Moreno opened his mouth, closed it. Then he laughed again, but this time there was something else in it. Something that might have been wonder. "You really did it," he said. "You made them fight ghosts for 3 months. Because we refused to stop." She said it flat, without emphasis. "Because we were willing to die alone, in the dark, without anyone knowing." The tactical plot updated. The Dominion ships had halted their approach. Their formation wavered, then stabilized. They were looking at 2,000 contacts. They were doing the math. 14 seconds. Ward watched the timer tick down. 14 seconds of hesitation. That was the entire war, distilled. 14 seconds of a commander, second-guessing his own sensors. 14 seconds of doubt, planted and watered and harvested over 3 months of running. She activated the decoys. The reactor grenades detonated in sequence, one after another, each one a tiny sun that flared and died. The transmitters screamed their final lies into the void. The Dominion sensors would show 2,000 ships burning hard, burning hot, burning real. And then nothing, because there was nothing. The Valiant's hull buckled. The first impact came from the port quarter, a kinetic round that turned the aft section into a cloud of debris. The bridge lurched. Ward's safety harness caught her, and she felt the pressure drop as atmosphere bled through a crack in the viewport. Moreno was still standing. He had braced himself against the weapons console, and he was looking at her with an expression she had never seen on his face before. "Peace. Any last words?" he asked. Ward thought about the cargo container. Number 403, the one she had used in the first deception, back at the mining station. It was still out there, somewhere, tumbling through the Capri corridor. A piece of scrap with a faded stencil, and a story no one would ever tell. "One ship cannot stop an armada," she said. "But an armada that doesn't exist? That can." The second impact took the bridge. She did not feel it. She was already gone, somewhere else, watching the numbers converge in the dark. 68 days. She had bought 68 days. That was enough. That was everything. The last thing the Valiant transmitted was a single line of text, buried in the decrypted metadata of its final log. Ghost Fleet standing down. All assets expended. And then, nothing. The debris field spread across 1,000 kilometers, steel and ceramic and carbon fiber, tumbling in silence, catching the light of the distant star before fading into shadow. Pieces of the Valiant, what was left of her, drifted past the sensor arrays of Dominion warships that had finally stopped firing. No one ordered salvage. There was nothing to recover. Only scrap and dead transmitters and the faint residual heat of reactors that had been deliberately overloaded. The Dominion fleet passed through in formation, grim and silent. Their sensor logs recorded the debris as exactly what it was. One heavy cruiser, destroyed, no supporting vessels, no escape pods, no distress signals, just wreckage. Grand Strategos Kareth reviewed the final report from his private quarters. He did not speak for a long time, then he deleted the file and ordered the invasion to resume. He had lost 71 days, Earth. High Command received the transmission 17 hours later. It arrived as a compressed data burst, routed through a chain of automated relays that had been set to activate on a timer. The message had been sent before the Valiant's final engagement, stored in a hardened buffer, and released when the ship's transponder went dark. The duty officer who flagged it was a young lieutenant named Harlow, working the third shift in a bunker buried under the Swiss Alps. She had been processing casualty reports for 6 hours. Her coffee had gone cold. The air recycler hummed at a frequency that made her teeth ache. She saw the header, HCS Valiant, final log transmission. Black. She opened it. The file contained a single page of text, Decoy deployment logs, fuel expenditure records, a list of cargo containers and their assigned transmitter frequencies, 412 entries, each with a status code. Expended. At the bottom, a recorded audio file. Harlow played it. Captain Ward's voice was calm, flat, the voice of someone who had run out of things to fear. Ghost fleet standing down. All assets expended. Recommend continuing deception operations if possible. A pause would out. The transmission ended. Harlow sat in the dim light of her console. The bunker was quiet. Somewhere behind her, a printer was feeding out logistics reports. The sound of footsteps in the corridor. Someone laughing at a joke she could not hear. She flagged the file for the duty admiral and sent it up the chain. Then she picked up her cold coffee, took a sip, and opened the next report. Admiral Hayes received the transmission at 0347 hours local time. He was 56 years old, had lost 2 sons to the war, and had not slept more than 4 hours in a single stretch since the fall of Tau Ceti. He read the log twice. He listened to Ward's voice once. He did not play it again. He closed the file. Her name goes on the wall, he said. That was all. The wall was a holographic display in the main atrium of command, a scrolling list of ship names and personnel lost in the defense of human space. It updated automatically. No ceremony, no speeches, just a line of text added to a list that grew longer every day. Heavy cruiser, 187 crew, lost, with all hands. Corridor. The names beneath it scrolled too fast to read. No one stopped to look. Months passed. The evacuation of the frontier worlds was complete. 20 billion civilians had been moved to Sol, to the asteroid habitats, to the outer colonies that had not yet been attacked. The logistics of it was staggering. Ships running continuous loops, supplies stockpiled in orbital warehouses, entire cities dismantled and rebuilt in new locations. It had taken 71 days longer than the original estimate, 71 days that the Valiant had bought. No one said that out loud. There was no need. The numbers spoke for themselves. Industry began rebuilding. Shipyards that had been dormant for years reactivated their dry docks. Keels were laid for new destroyers, new cruisers, new carriers. Engineers who had fled the frontier returned to their drafting tables. Factory workers who had spent months on evacuation transports went back to assembly lines. The first ships of the new Second Fleet launched from orbital slips 8 months after the Valiant's destruction. They were not ghosts. They were steel and plasma and targeting computers. They had crews who had trained in simulators, who had studied the deception logs, who knew what had been sacrificed to give them time. On a space station in high Earth orbit, a cleaning crew found a paper cup floating in a zero-G corridor. It was half full of cold coffee. The cup had a handwritten note on it, faded almost to illegibility. Ward, Valiant, do not jettison. No one knew how it had gotten there. The cleaning supervisor looked at it for a moment. Then she placed it in a maintenance locker, closed the door, and moved on. There was work to do. The museum is quiet when I step inside. Low gravity makes every footfall slightly too light, like walking on the surface of a memory rather than solid ground. The air recyclers hum at a frequency I never quite got used to even after all these years. A half pitch higher than shipboard systems, barely perceptible until you listen for its absence. The Hall of Deception unfolds in a long corridor, holographic displays flickering on either side. School groups cluster around the larger installations, their voices echoing off the concrete walls. I let them pass, wait until the path clears, then head toward the back corner. Cargo container 403 sits under a single spotlight. I stop 10 meters away. Just look at it. It's smaller than I remember. That's always what happens, isn't it? You spend months hauling something through hell, and it grows larger in your mind than any physical object could possibly be. But here it is. Dull grey metal, dented along the port edge, scorch marks radiating from the starboard corner like a dark flower. The stencil is faded but still legible. HCS Valiant, MISC. Please do not jettison. The coffee stain is still there, a dark ring near the bottom edge, where Petrov set his mug down during one of the long nights. Briggs never let us forget he'd have to clean it, never did. You're staring. I turn. Chen stands behind me, her cybernetic arm catching the light as she gestures toward the container. She's older now, we both are, but her eyes still have that sharp edge, the one that used to flicker across her face when she had a deception running and no one else in the room knew it yet. Didn't hear you coming, I say. Low gravity, quiet footsteps. She smiles. I learned from the best. We stand together, looking at the container. A child's voice cuts through the ambient noise. One of the school group, maybe 10 years old, pointing at our exhibit. Did that really fool an entire armada? The guide, a young officer in an immaculate dress uniform, starts to answer. But May steps forward, and the guide recognizes her, steps aside. It helped, May says. Her voice carries, clear and calm, the same tone she used to use when briefing Ward on a new signal pattern. But it wasn't the container. It was the people who filled it with lies. She touches the hull. Her fingers find the coffee stain, trace its edge. They never stopped, she says. They refused to stop. That's what won. The child stares at her, at the metal arm, at the way she touches the container like it's an old friend. The guide clears her throat, gently redirects the group toward the next exhibit. Their footsteps fade, echoing off the walls. You made that sound easy, I say. Nothing about it was easy. May pulls her hand back. But the truth should be simple, shouldn't it? For the ones who come after. I look past the container, through the viewport at the far end of the hall. Beyond the lunar surface, beyond the black, I can see them. Real warships. Second Fleet, patrolling the system on their regular rotation. The hulls are clean, the reactors hot, the crews alive and breathing. 8 years ago, those hulls didn't exist. 8 years ago, Second Fleet was a lie we whispered into transmitters, hoping the Dominion would hear and believe. Now they're real. They still think it's funny, I say. The Dominion, I mean. They teach their officers about the Valiant deception in their academies. A cautionary tale about trusting sensor data. Mai laughs. It's a quiet sound, barely more than a breath. Let them. They'll teach their children about Second Fleet too. Except Second Fleet isn't a story anymore. No, it isn't. The ghosts became real because we refused to let them stay ghosts. You know, I say, I never asked. That last day, when Captain Ward ordered you onto the evac shuttle. I didn't want to go. I know, but you went. She's quiet for a long moment. Her cybernetic arm clicks softly as she flexes the fingers. She told me someone had to make sure the next generation knew how to lie properly. Another pause. I think she was being kind. Letting me live. Those words sit between us. Not heavy, not light, just there. She was good at that, I say. Kindness you didn't notice until later. Down the hall, another school group enters. Younger children, maybe 6 or 7, holding hands in a long chain. Their teacher points to the holographic display of the Capri corridor. Explains in simple words how one ship held off 3,000. The children don't understand yet, but someday they will. Come on, May says. There's fresh coffee in the staff room, not the synth stuff. The real kind, shipped in from Earth. I raise an eyebrow. That'll cost you. Some deceptions are worth the price. I follow her out of the hall. Behind us, in the spotlight, cargo container 403 waits in silence. The coffee stain remains. The scorch marks are still visible. Outside, through the viewport, Second Fleet continues its patrol. The ghosts are real now. They always were.